Welcome, football fans, to your Saturday NFL recap, review, and reaction. If you're ready, spike the like button, and don't forget to subscribe. I will be back on Sunday, not only with a live stream, but also weekly with my NFL review and recap, similar to this one. In this video, we will discuss the two NFL games from Saturday, and I wanted to make this video because these two games were highly impactful and influential to the AFC playoff race. The Kansas City Chiefs versus the Houston Texans, and the Baltimore Ravens at home versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. So without further ado, let me know in the comments your opinion on these games. What was your major takeaway from each game, and what did you find most interesting? Let's get started. Texans, Chiefs, Texans, Kansas City Chiefs, Houston Texans. The first game of the day. I was live for this one. Shout out to all the people that joined me in the chat. 27-19, the Kansas City Chiefs take it over the Houston Texans. The Chiefs are now 14-1. And quite frankly, maybe the worst 14-1 team I've ever witnessed. But nonetheless, they are 14-1. The Houston Texans are 9-6. Both teams are still first place in their divisions. The Texans will win their division. There's no doubt about it, despite the loss. Now, not only did they lose this game, but they lost some players in the game that had a large impact on the result. But I think there were some positives for both teams in this game, and we're going to discuss that. I think there were also some negatives for both teams in this game looking forward at the NFL playoffs. Because at the end of the day, I was kind of using this game as a test for both teams. You know, like, how good is that Chiefs offense? Can they block the Texans? Will they be able to move the ball and score points against a competent NFL defense? And for the Texans, I was curious about that offense. How would they move the football? How would Stroud play? How would the O-line look? So I had quite a few questions about this game. I think Kansas City winning this game. Overall, I think they were the better team. They did outgain the Texans 375-311. They did have 5 more first downs than Houston, 25-20. 25 first downs by the Chiefs is an impressive number against this Texans defense. Definitely. 7 for 13. Both teams were effective on third down, actually identical on third down. And that was a common theme for the Texans that kept them in this game, in my opinion. We'll get to that in a little bit. The Chiefs did have more rushing yards than Houston, I think because of the game script, more so than production or overall yards per carry and stuff like that. Sacks were relatively low. Penalties were influential in this game. Texans had 6, and I want to say 3 on one drive alone. And Kansas City only had 2 penalties. And I want to say maybe one of them was on special teams. So there were not a lot of penalties, especially in that second half where the refs kind of sort of like stopped calling stuff, which was really odd. Maybe because the NFL said, hey, stop calling these calls in the second quarter. It was really hurting the game at one point. But I thought this was actually a really good game from like a competition standpoint. It felt like an atmosphere of a playoff game. The quarterbacks, rising to the occasion on third down. Just that feel of every third down mattering at such a scale, and the field position and the defenses. It felt like a very solid, balanced game where the offenses would make some plays, the defenses would make some plays. But overall, I was impressed by Kansas City's offense in this game. I was impressed by their ability to keep their rhythm in the passing game. I thought that Xavier Worthy had an excellent game. This might have been one of the better games I've seen him play as an NFL pro. 7 catches on 11 targets for 65 yards and a touchdown. He was dangerous throughout the contest. I thought that D-Hop converted a couple of early third downs, and he had a couple of influential plays. I thought that Marquise Brown, an early fourth down conversion that was impactful to the result. He was at least, in the game, getting involved. He didn't do a ton, but he was involved. It was his first game as a Chief. That was nice to see. Kelsey made a couple catches, but didn't have like a huge game or anything. I thought Kareem Hunt was pretty darn good at running back, 11 carries for 55 yards and a touchdown. Pacheco was more the quiet one for the Chiefs side. I thought Joe Tooney was extremely impressive playing left tackle instead of left guard in this game, which could be a huge thing moving forward for the Chiefs. That, I think, is the correct decision for sure. The Texans got some pressure in the game, but I felt like Mahomes was mostly able to manage that. There was a near fumble for 6 that ended up being overturned into a incompletion, which I thought was the correct call. It was close, but the correct call. That could have turned the tide of the game. There was also a couple passes that could have been intercepted for the Texans defensively that were just a little shy, right? While on the other side, CJ did get intercepted a couple of times. Now, I want to go into something here that is part of CJ Stroud, but also part of the NFL in general. I think when people are watching games, people assume that the guy that is throwing interceptions is automatically playing a poor game, but I think that more people as fans need to be smarter about interceptions. They need to be smarter about the context and what is happening in the game when those interceptions result and whose fault it is and how they kind of locate that in their mind, right? So this always kind of something that I fall back onto is the 2021 NFC Championship. It was the 2020 season, 2021 NFC Championship. Tom Brady and the Bucs versus Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. And Brady in that game throws 3 interceptions. But if you actually watch the course of the game and you ask yourself at the end of the game which quarterback played better, I think 90% of people would have said Tom Brady played better. Like, he made more throws, he made more third down conversions, he made more red zone conversions, he made bigger throws, he made that, halftime throw to Scotty Miller, right? The first drive of the game, going down the field and scoring, Mike Evans, right? And then thinking about Aaron Rodgers, the scramble he didn't make, the sacks he did take, the throws he passed up, you know what I mean? So you have to put into context not only the turnovers, the completions, the completion percentage, but you have to kind of look at the game in terms of the impactful plays that are made and not made, and the impactful plays that are made and avoided. And this is something that I think Mahomes, he is the best in football and has been the best over the past few years, and this is why he wins, is because he, better than any quarterback that is currently playing, can make impactful plays in key moments and avoid negative plays in key moments. That is why Patrick Mahomes has been the best quarterback. It's not because he has the most stats, the best yards, the best touchdowns. He does win the most, but I think that's a function of understanding how to win. And that's what Tom Brady did, right? That's what Joe Montana did, okay? So when it comes to CJ Stroud in this game, the first interception, I don't like it because it's the first drive of the game. I don't necessarily hate the throw. I thought the throw was a little bit forced. He was under pressure. It was 3rd down and long. But it was an arm punt. So the significance in the game wasn't like amazingly impactful, right? Like, he punted it to the 35-yard line. Now, would I have preferred him maybe throw that incomplete and then the Texans punt? Sure. But overall, it's not going to completely destroy your football team if you throw an interception at the 35-yard line on a deep post. Now, I thought the decision was poor. I thought the throw was poor. Those things are separate. But to me, like, was the interception terrible? Not necessarily. You know what I'm saying? The second interception, I thought was worse because much worse, actually, because of the situation, right? Like, it's before the half. If you throw that incomplete instead of forcing it underneath for like a 4 or 5 yard gain that really doesn't make a huge difference in the game or the spot or the field goal attempt, if you don't force that and you just throw it incomplete or take a sack, then you're punting. Maybe even the best thing there to do sometimes is take a sack, right? To run the clock or force the Chiefs to call timeout in that situation. Take a sack or run and slide or something. Like, just kill the clock. And then you could punt. You could at least pin the Chiefs deep in their end, and it's going to be harder for them to drive down the field and add a field goal before halftime. You understand what I'm saying? So I thought the second interception was a lot more impactful because as a quarterback, you have to understand the game. You have to understand the situation. You have to understand how it's going to impact and influence the momentum. Because momentum to me is real in sports. If you've played sports, you understand that it is real. As much as these analytical nerds will tell you it's not real, it is real. Okay, so that's my point about these interceptions is like you've got to kind of see when they're coming. Some of them don't really matter. Some of them do matter. Some of them are not on the quarterback. Some of them are on the quarterback, but it's understanding, I think, how they impact the game more than anything. I actually thought Stroud played quite well in this game, actually. You know, his stat line was fairly mid. I mean, he was 23 for 39, 244, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I thought he actually, like, throw for throw, probably made more big throws than Mahomes in this game. Like, throw for throw, dot for dot, play for play, third down for third down. I think overall, Stroud probably made more throws. Early in the game, he was awesome on third down. When he had Tank Dell and Nico Collins and Dalton Schultz together, it was hard for the Chiefs to get a stop. And this is a major takeaway for me in a negative fashion from the Chiefs. Positively, I like their offense. I like the rhythm. I like the play calling. I thought the balance was there. I thought they mostly were pass heavy, which was nice. Defensively is my negative for them. This Texans offense is not exactly dynamic. This season, they've really struggled to block. And yes, they do have talent, and Stroud is talented. But overall, I think if the Chiefs lose in the playoffs and they don't three-peat, I think the biggest thing we're going to look at is their lack of secondary depth. The corner position, they were getting routed up. Like last year, you wouldn't see them lose one-on-ones in man coverage that often, right? And I think Stroud is a rare quarterback to the degree of where he is kind of more of that traditional pocket passer, where against man coverage, he has a unique sense of timing and accuracy and touch. And I think this is why the Chiefs struggle with Joe Burrow, because they're kind of similar. Burrow's like a better player than Stroud, like a better version. But you watch them play, and it's like, third down, like, okay, we're going to go to this corner route to Tank Dell. We're going to go to this speed route. Watching the coverage, see it. Okay, post here to Tank Dell on time, in rhythm, perfect pass, like, against the coverage. We're going to run this speed out to Tank Dell. Notice how I'm saying Tank Dell a lot. On third down and 6. It's going to be open. You're going to hit it. This time, we're going to hit a crosser to Nico Collins. This time, we're going to hit the dump off to Dalton Schultz. Like, there's a lot of quarterbacks in today's age that honestly can't operate with that sense of rhythm and timing and accuracy. I thought Stroud actually played really well in that sense throughout the day. I thought where he played worse was near the end when he didn't have Tank, because the Chiefs were able to kind of focus a little bit more attention on Schultz and Nico Collins. And there was less options to go with in terms of, especially against man coverage. But I think we've seen a sense of like, if you're playing a team with more than one receiver, the Chiefs kind of struggle. Or if you play a quarterback that's able to pick you apart through the air, you can struggle a little bit if you're the Chiefs. I think that's their weakness. I also, there were plays where the Chiefs got pressure, especially on blitzes, but it felt like they almost had to overcompensate by blitzing a lot, and their blitzes tended to pay off near the end of the game. There's no doubt about that. I thought Spags hit Slowick and Stroud with a couple blitzes, like a nickel blitz off the edge near the end of the game that got to Stroud. There was a couple plays like that. But early in the game, especially when, they lost Shaq Mason early. They had to reshuffle their line. This is already a catastrophe in offensive line, right? The Texans actually were pretty good up front during this game, which might be a positive for the Texans. They only allowed 2 sacks. Against defenses of the Chiefs' caliber, it feels like they've been giving up 5, 4, 6 sacks a game. It really does feel that way. Maybe Stroud did a better job of managing the pocket and moving and getting out of pressure, and he did do a good job of that. But I also feel like he just overall had more time than usual. And I think that's also a little bit of the Chiefs' fault of like their 4-man rush. If it's not Chris Jones, it feels like it's kind of lackluster. There was a couple times where George Karlaftis got a penalty or got a hit, or not a penalty, but got a hit or got a pressure is what I meant. Mike Dana got maybe one key pressure or hurry. But like overall, it wasn't too overwhelming. I expected more pressure on Stroud coming into this game. So that was maybe the negative. I think positively, I was more impressed with like just how they were able to create some of their third downs, some of their, just some of their completions from Mahomes. It felt like Andy Reid was on it in this game. Like he was in his bag. Like whether it was he knew when the man was coming and they would run some sort of mesh concept or like a wheel route to P. Ryan out of the backfield with like a pick or something. When it was zone, they were successful in empty. They were successful in spread, kind of dinking and dunking it underneath the defense. Using Kelsey, using Hopkins, just doing enough there. And whenever they kind of needed the short yardage, there was a 4th down stop in this game by the Texans, but they adjusted off of that later on. The Chiefs actually went for it twice in this game. They got one of them. Now, looking at the sequencing of the game, I felt like the first half, this game could have went either way. Right? So it started off with 7-0. Stroud throws an interception. Chiefs drive the field on their first drive and they score and Mahomes runs it in. And after that drive, I'm like, okay, like the Chiefs offense, like they always kind of score on their first drive, or like they're really good early in games typically because Reid has a good script. We'll see how they evolve from here. The Texans then respond with a field goal. Then the Texans get the lead 10-7. And then, the Chiefs score and they go up 14-10. But there was a part, the Chiefs drive where they went up 14-10. There was at least 3 penalties in that sequence where it was like the refs kind of felt like they were giving the Chiefs some points. Like they were almost like giving them the drive. You know what I mean? And this was actually tweeted by Ryan Fitzpatrick earlier in the day. He said that was a very 2024 Chiefs drive. That was the same drive of the fumble for 6 that was called back. So Fitzpatrick says, called a sack, fumble, touchdown on the field, reversed it, and a 15-yard penalty for roughing the passer on the hit that was the sack fumble. So that gave the Chiefs a first down. There was a blown coverage on 3rd down, and Mahomes makes the defense pay. The Chiefs were stopped on 3rd and 3, but it was defensive holding. There was a pass over the middle for 20 yards to Justin Watson that was incomplete. A long 3rd down conversion to Travis Kelsey. Show Taylor Swift in the suite. Incomplete pass to a frustrated Travis Kelsey. And results in a 13-play drive that eats over 5 minutes of clock and a touchdown. That was one of the touchdowns for the Chiefs. An excruciating drive to watch as a viewer because there's heavy influence from the referees. Poor defense because of blown coverages. Poor offense because of missed throws and catches. And there was actually quite a few plays in this game that could have been made by the Chiefs that weren't. Whether by missed throws by Mahomes, who honestly did not have many big-time tight window throws in this game, in my opinion, despite 28 completions, many of them being short completions for yards after catch, or wide open. There were rather, like Justin Watson, I remember the play he's talking about, he couldn't locate the ball. Like that was not a good job by him. And that resulted in the touchdown to go up 14-10, which was a highly fishy drive, in my opinion, from the officials. After that, That was the drive where the Texans drove down and they looked like they were going to get points again, or they looked like they're going to make it 14-13, maybe even go down and score a touchdown. And then there's a very fishy offensive pass interference call on Tank Dell that really wasn't a good call at all. It was horrific. It was like one of the worst calls I've ever seen. And that moved the Texans back to make it 2nd and 20, 3rd and 20. Ultimately, Stroud throws the interception, which was really costly because then the Chiefs were able to add another field goal before the half to make it 17-10. The Chiefs also got the ball after halftime, but the Texans stopped them. I think that was when they stopped them on 4th down, if I'm not mistaken. Then the Texans tied the game up, or almost tied the game up. They missed the extra point. But that was when Tank Dell got hurt. He scored a touchdown. And this is where the game changed. It flipped. Just in terms of the Texans emotionally, you could just tell they were sucked dry of emotion. When Tank Dell scored a touchdown and got hit by his own player to blow his knee out, CJ Stroud was bawling on the sidelines. All their players were concerned. They were all upset. And you could just sense the momentum, the energy, the passion, everything just soak out and dry out of the Texans. And that really, I think, turned the tide of the game. Ultimately, there were all these little things in the second quarter that didn't go the Texans' way. 2 interceptions in the first half. You're only down 17-10. You tie it up or nearly tie it up. You miss an extra point, 17-16. You're right in the game. But ultimately, you lose your best friend if you're CJ Stroud. You lose a good teammate if you're the Texans. And it was a really catastrophic injury. It was tough to watch. They didn't really even show it on the broadcast. He hopefully will be okay in the future, obviously out for the rest of the year. And that brings up the point of the Texans of I think they should go out and sign Deontay Johnson, take a chance there, maybe even sign Odell Beckham, something. They need something. They need a spark at wide receiver without Tank Dell. It looked like he was having his best game of the year, man. He had 6 catches for 98 yards and a touchdown, which was absolute beautiful ball by CJ Stroud for the touchdown, and a great catch by Tank Dell for the touchdown, deep down the field. Beautiful. And Stroud was actually attempting more deep passes in this game than typical. But man, that was tough to watch. But the Chiefs respond with a pretty easy, methodical drive and a worthy touchdown that puts them up 24-16, an 8-point game because of the killer missed extra point. Texans managed to drive down the field and add a field goal to make the game a bit tighter at 24-19. But then the Chiefs closed the game out with a field goal from Butker. And it's still an 8-point game, but the Texans were just never the same offensively without Tank. They just didn't have that. They just didn't have that alternative option. And Spags was dialed in on the blitzes and the pressures. And this is a game where the Texans lost Shaq Mason, Jimmy Ward, and Tank Dell in the same game. And it was just, I think, a little bit too much to overcome, both from a physical standpoint and an emotional standpoint. And you already have Azeez Al-Shaair suspended, Jalen Petrie on IR. This is a team, Fatou Kazi not playing. You have a number of injuries that influence this team. Stephon Diggs on IR. So I think the Texans in this game, they proved to me they can still hang with these top dogs in the AFC. We've seen it all year, and we've seen them hang with every good team they've played. But they're just a little bit below. They're just a little bit off. Not only the injuries hurting them, perhaps when they get a couple players. Hopefully Mason's okay, Ward's okay. Hopefully they can do something to manufacture some receiving. But beyond maybe one win in the wild card round against the Steelers, I don't really necessarily see them going further than that. I just think they're a little bit disjointed offensively. The offensive line is just a little off, right? And this game was one of their better games, to be fair. But just a little bit, too inconsistent. Their run game, a little bit too inconsistent. Their defense, good, but you can scheme around their pressure, right? You can scheme around their pressure. The Chiefs, meanwhile, they're not the best version of the Chiefs we've ever seen. This defense is worse than last year. The offense, I think, got it going a little bit in this game, and I thought it was impressive. But I also don't feel like they're deadly offensively. And every game they play in the playoffs will be close. But they're so good in these close games. They don't turn it over. They kick field goals well. And they convert third downs. They convert fourth downs. and they're just a little bit better coached. The Chiefs feel like they'll probably be back in the AFC Championship, and it will come down to if they can beat Buffalo. That's probably what it's going to come down to, in all honesty, because that's where I want to shift focus to the next game. Those are my overall thoughts of that game. Plenty discussed there. You guys let me know if I missed anything. I was overall impressed by Stroud. I thought that Dell and Collins played well. I thought that To'o played well for the Texans. Christian Harris played solid. Jimmy Ward, when he was in, played well. I thought that the Chiefs defensively, Chris Jones was pretty good. I thought Trent McDuffie made some nice tackles. Didn't see him too much in coverage. Justin Reed, I thought, had a pretty good game. Schultz had a pretty good game for the Texans. Worthy had a good game. Karlaftis had a good game. Yeah. So, tight game. Playoff atmosphere. Texans just not quite good enough, especially without the guys that they were missing throughout the game. 34-17, the Baltimore Ravens take it over the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a classic example of a trap line set by Vegas. The spread before the game was 7. And every NFL fan is saying 7. The Steelers beat the Ravens last time. They always play tight with the Ravens. Like, this feels fishy. But the game's in Baltimore, and the Ravens take it 34-17. And I never really had the feeling that the Steelers were going to win. Not before the game, not during the game. It never felt like the Steelers were going to win. It felt like they were going to keep it close at times. But when you were watching it, you're like, how is this game close? You know, you're watching it like, how is this game not a blowout? The Steelers are now 10-5. The Ravens are now 10-5. And I think the Ravens now have the edge in the division, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. But they're both 10-5. Steelers still have to play the Chiefs next week, and then the Bengals the week after. The Ravens play the Texans, which will not be an easy game. And I think they finish with maybe Cleveland, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just check. I think they probably finish with Cleveland. It's usually divisional games in that last game there. But honestly, I was more impressed by the level of play in Chiefs-Texans than I was in Ravens-Steelers. It felt like, to me, the Texans and Chiefs both looked more like contenders than the Ravens and Steelers. And I didn't think I would say that. And the Ravens won by 17 here. It wasn't like they won by 3 or 7. But I still wasn't overly impressed by the Ravens. I thought their offense was a little bit meh. I thought their defense definitely showed cracks. And if not for a pick six near the end of the game by Marlon Humphrey in the fourth quarter, this game score-wise and production-wise would appear a lot closer. Right? The Ravens did outproduce the Steelers, 25 first downs to 19. They did have nearly 100 more yards, actually more than 100 more yards, 418 to 315. 418 against the Steelers is impressive. I'll give them that. Their run game was extremely impressive compared to last time they played. 24 rushes for 162 yards by Derrick Henry. Lamar didn't do a lot as a runner, okay? But it still felt like the Steelers moved the ball a little easier than I would have expected in this game, especially early. It felt like Lamar didn't play his overall cleanest game. It felt like the special teams of the Ravens, and there was a lot of sloppiness to the game, offensively, special teams, overall. And you're just watching the Steelers, you're like, they're down guys on defense. They didn't have Ogunjobi. They didn't have Elliott. They didn't have Dante Jackson. Joey Porter's in. He's out. He's in. He's out. And you're like, shouldn't the Ravens be blowing this team out? And you're watching them offensively, and you're like, Russell Wilson is bad. Russell Wilson is lousy. Russell Wilson looks terrible. And, you know, they couldn't really run the ball, the Steelers. Jaylen Warren had a couple nice runs, but that was about it. They don't have George Pickens playing. And you're like, who are they throwing it to? You know, you see Cordell Patterson score a touchdown. You see some random tight end, Michael Pruitt, a backup, catching a touchdown. Like, these guys the Steelers are manufacturing offense with, Ben Skoranek, like these guys, Calvin Austin. It's like these guys are not household names, but ultimately the better, more talented team won, and they also happened to be at home, and they covered convincingly on the scoreboard. But I wasn't convinced by the performance, if that makes sense. Maybe it was because the Ravens were 4 for 10 on third down. They couldn't really extend drives the way that you would really like on that down. It felt like the Ravens, they had a couple fumbles that didn't bounce the Steelers' way. The Steelers had a fumble by Russell Wilson in the Ravens' red zone that bounced the Ravens' way. That turned the tide of the game a little bit. That could have maybe made the game a little bit tighter and closer than expected, and maybe happened to be the game that we all expected, right? But, if you look at it, if you take the pick six away, 27-17 maybe sounds a little bit more accurate to what the game really was. Because if you take that pick six away, that's kind of a random play, a great play by Marlon Humphrey, bad play by Russell Wilson, but you had Lamar Jackson throwing a pick, in the Steelers and, Steelers red zone. You had the Steelers fumbling it. You had a couple fumbles by the Ravens that were recovered by the Ravens. Just stuff like that, But Russ, I thought 22 for 33, 217, 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. He was up and down. He had a couple drives. I thought, that first drive and second touchdown drive, like the 2 touchdown drives, I thought he was pretty good. He was in rhythm overall, like executed the offense. The thing that frustrates me about Russ is his lack of accepting checkdowns and quick throws. You very rarely watch Russell Wilson hit the top of his drop and just throw the football. There's so many times where it feels like there's a guy open. He's looking at the guy, and he just doesn't throw to the open guy to try to go for a bigger play that's not there, and he throws it away or he takes a sack. That happens far too often for my liking. The run game of the Steelers, just incompetent. The protection for the Steelers was spotty. Kyle Van Noy kind of dominated them in this game. The Ravens ended up with 3 sacks. Calvin Austin continues to be a player for me. He made a really impressive catch downfield later in the game. 4 for 65. Freiermuth wasn't involved as much as I would have liked to have seen. Mike Williams still not very involved. Van Jefferson was very quiet. It just felt like the Steelers, their entire offense was kind of RPO, screen, play action. A lot of smoke and mirrors, a little bit of running here and there. And Russell actually scrambled pretty well at a couple points, including the fumble where it looked like a really impressive run until he fumbled it. Offensively for the Ravens, I thought their run game really engineered them to the victory. Derrick Henry was dominant, a majority of his runs being on zone reads and read option type plays, where Lamar was freezing the edge and Henry was able to take it with kind of a number in his favor. And that really opened up Derrick Henry for a massive game against the Steelers, where Lamar was really holding the Steelers in check by constantly being a threat to run the ball, but never really running it. Always handing it to Henry. And I thought for the most part, that one sequence where Lamar throws the pick, where Bateman stops his route, and there's 3 Steelers over there, and Lamar looks like he throws it straight to the Steelers. I think they should have just kept running the ball and kind of finished the game. Just run the ball. Just run the ball. Monken sometimes confuses me with his over complication of things. Just stick with what's working. Just run the ball. Sometimes he tries to be a little too pretty, a little too fancy. Just get it done. Lamar, I thought through the air, little Mark Andrews, he had a pretty good game, scored a touchdown. Isaiah Likely early on caught a couple passes, including a touchdown. Zay Flowers had some explosives, including a big downfield catch and a big play down the stretch that kind of closed their victory. Justice Hill took a brutal hit and he got concussed. That was awful. Bateman scored a touchdown, but otherwise didn't do a ton. He was injured entering the game. They still, to me, are missing another threat at wide receiver. They still feel a little bare in that department to me. Their run game, though, was dominant. Their defense, I thought, was extremely, spotty is not the word. I thought it was overrated. If you looked at the box score, if you just watched the game, it felt like they played worse than the result. 17 points doesn't speak to all the holes that I felt like were left open, all the easy dump-offs Russell Wilson had, all the easy checkdowns, all the easy yak plays, all the holes in the zones. It felt like if there's a more competent drop-back passer with a couple better receivers out there, that's 300 yards easy. So, to me, I'm concerned about the Ravens, their inconsistency, relying on explosives through the passing game. Defensively, I'm concerned about their overall coverage. Run defense is not a problem. Coverage is a problem. And special teams and sloppiness continue to be a problem for the Ravens. So, I was not surprised by the score. I was not surprised by the outcome. I expected it to be a little closer, just given the rivalry. But I've been saying the Steelers are not a very good team. The Steelers are not a very good team. The Steelers have good things about them. I think they're well coached. I think typically they fight hard. They're physical. Typically, they don't really hurt themselves and beat themselves. They play typically good defense. This game, not really. Front seven is really dominant, and they change the tide of games often. But this is a team, to me, that's one and done. Like, Steelers take on the Texans in Houston. I'd slightly favor the Texans. 3.5. That type of game. It could go either way. I think that would be a game where it could be decided at the end. Both teams are fairly similar. I think the Texans have the better quarterback. They got Nico Collins. That game could go either way. Texans are at home, though. It's not in Pittsburgh, right? So if that's the matchup, I feel like it's an either way game. Steelers wouldn't surprise me if they win, but then I don't see how they get past Buffalo or Kansas City. I just don't see it. Like, no world do I see it happening. So I think this is a pretty, fraudulent team. And I've been saying that for a while. Like, nothing here shows me that it's any different than years past. The defense is good, but when they play a really good offense, they don't look quite as dominant. And this is even a team that they typically play really well defensively against. And they struggled to find the answers. Part of that was due to injuries. Part of that was due to, I think, a different environment, being in Baltimore. I mean, this is the first time Lamar's played the Steelers with fans. So think about that for a second. But, Lamar's stats, I think, look better than his performance. I wasn't, overly impressed with Lamar's performance. I thought he made a couple nice plays, but there weren't a lot of, Lamar running around and making scramble drill attempts, which was maybe part of the game plan. But the run game mostly engineered this team to the victory. So, there it is, guys, 34-17. I don't have as much to say about this game. Not nearly as much. It was a lot more kind of obvious, trap line. I want to thank Russell Wilson for absolutely blowing my parlay because he threw that pick six, which ruined the total bet for me. But at least the Ravens covered the teaser. The Texans covered the teaser. Appreciate you. Sunday, we'll be back with our recap, with our live stream. Appreciate everybody tuning in. It's Mitch. Gronk spike the like button. Let me know any opinions about these games. Overall, my overall thoughts about these teams. Steelers are pretty much what I thought they were. Ravens, honestly, despite a win that was rather convincing on the scoreboard, I think I moved them down in my power rankings from number 5 to number 7. I think I feel better about the Vikings and Packers after watching this game than the Ravens, weirdly enough. I feel more confident in the Texans, but I also feel like Tank Dell, losing him is going to be huge. If Tank Dell would have just remained healthy throughout the game, I probably would have felt really good about the Texans. But I feel decent about them. And then the Chiefs, I just feel more confident that they are. I feel more confident that they're actually good after watching this game against the Texans. Weird to say that, but yeah, I feel more confident in them being good and them actually being warranted to be in the AFC Championship rather than before. You know what I mean? But I also feel like they do have some exposable things for teams to look at. So those are my opinions. Let me know yours. It's Mitch. Thanks for watching. Peace, guys.